they worship the ism. Roman Catholicism's God is not Jesus. Roman Catholicism's God is the institution, Holy Mother, the Church. What the Church says is superior to what God says. In practice, it can nullify it. Orthodox Jews worship Rabbinic Judaism. That's what they worship, Rabbinic Judaism. Jehovah's Witnesses worship the Watchtower Society. Mormons worship the Church of Latter-day Saints. If you understand Islam, they talk about Allah, but Muslims really worship Islam. They deify the religion. They deify the institution. They deify the house. All false religions will deify the house instead of the one who built it, because it is the nature of fallen man to worship that which is created instead of the creator. That is the nature of fallen man, hence it finds itself into religion. You'll see, Islam teaches, Roman Catholics, the church teaches, Judaism, the Talmud teaches. Their real God is the ism. Their real authority is the institution. It's the house. That's what they look to. That's what they look to. But of course, these false religions will collapse unless the Lord builds a house that cannot stand. The only thing that will be left at the end of the age are the true people of God, the true children of God, the true church. The rest will be gone. The faithful bride is the only one that will ultimately remain. Every house is built by someone, but God's the builder of all things. Now, in verse 5, it continues comparing Jesus to Moses. Moses was faithful in all his house as a servant for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken later. Moses was faithful, and he was faithful concerning things which were to later be revealed, particularly the things revealed in and through Christ, the Messiah, of whom Moses wrote and taught. Remember what Jesus said, Moses spoke of me. John chapter 5, you search the scriptures. They're about me. But then it goes on, okay? But Christ was faithful as a son over his house, whose house we are, if we hold fast our confidence and the boast of our hope firm until the end. What does it say? Whose house we are. The church, the true church, the faithful church, is the earthly home of Jesus. It is the earthly home of Jesus, to which he will one day come for it. And he will dwell among his people in the millennial reign and beyond. His house, we are his house. We have a teaching, a very old teaching called temple typology, where we explore this at greater depth. I believe it is still available on the website. We'll just look at certain aspects of this for the moment. Look at 1 Peter 2:5, please. You are living stones, being built up as a spiritual house. We are living stones being built up as a spiritual house. Now, Jesus spoke of the second temple as his Father's house, didn't he? Didn't he? But you remember on our teachings on Palm Sunday, where we explained what it meant when they told Jesus to be silent, and they told Jesus to tell the people to be silent when they were calling upon him. And Jesus said, if these remain silent, the stones will cry out. We are the stones of the temple. What Jesus was saying to them in Jewish metaphor is, if The Jews don't proclaim me as the Messiah. The Christians will. Okay? The stones will cry out. We are the stones of the temple. So it goes on with John the Baptist. You have the Pharisees who thought that they had salvation automatically simply because they were the people of God by birth and circumcision. And they came. But what did John the Baptist tell them? God could raise up Abraham's children out of the stones. The stones. We are the stones. Look with me, please, to Galatians chapter 2. In Galatians chapter 2, Paul goes to have his famous meeting, and he is greeted by two of the original 12 apostles. He comes to them, and they extend the right hand of fellowship. But how does he describe them? He says in chapter 1, verse 19, I did not see any other of the apostles except James, the Lord's brother, at one particular time. But then he talks about, in the next chapter 2, verse 8, who effectively worked for Peter and his apostleship to the circumcised, effectively worked me also to the Gentiles. And recognizing the grace that had been given to me, James and Cephas and John, James and Cephas being Peter, the Latinization of Kepha, and John were reputed to be pillars of the temple, the ones who hold it up. The church is God's house. It is the temple. But architecturally and structurally, it is held up by pillars, These are the ones who have the original apostolic authority, but it's also the ones who continue in the authority of the apostles' teaching. Look with me, please, to the book of Revelation, chapter 2. Sorry, chapter 3. Okay. Verse 12. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Those who continue in the teaching of the apostles of the New Testament will be pillars. Okay, they have a status. There were two pillars in the temple of Solomon and of the second temple of Zerubbabel. One was named Boaz, and the other was named Yakin. Yakin and Boaz. Yakin means Yahweh will establish. Yahweh will establish. Yakin. Boaz means in his strength. In his strength. Yahweh will establish the pillars in his strength. What does it say? We are his house. Turn with me, if you will, please, to the epistle to the Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 2, please. Verse 20. Having been built upon the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, Christ alone being the cornerstone, in whom the whole building being fitted together is growing into a holy temple in the Lord. In him, you also are being built together into a dwelling of God in the Spirit. The church is a spiritual temple, but notice it is under construction. It is under construction. Okay. Being built. And in this process of being built, it all depends structurally on a cornerstone. Now, some of you may have been with us to Israel, and one of the places we visit is the synagogue ruins in Chorazin. in Chorazin. And you can see, and Jesus, of course, taught in Chorazin, and this synagogue is built most probably on the location of the preceding one that Jesus would have been in and taught in. And you can see the best preserved example of the seat of Moses in Chorazin. But you can also see the best example, perhaps the best example, of a cornerstone. A cornerstone is not our cornerstone. Our cornerstone is literally in a corner, and it is a dedication stone. It tells you what year a building was built and dedicated. Okay, that's the cornerstone. In Hebrew, it is the Rosh Pinah, literally the head of the corner. The Romans, and even before them somewhat, but the Romans and the Greco-Roman world particularly, they understood the incredible strength of an arch, how you can make things so strong and last by the use of an arch. There's a small bridge over a deep gorge in Switzerland that an automobile or a small truck can still drive over. That was built by the Romans. The arch was very strong. But the arch is held together by a stone in the middle of the curve. An arch in Hebrew is the same word as ark, keshet, but the stone in the middle is the Rosh Pinah. It holds the rest of the stones in place with tension. It's at the center, and it exerts a pressure in both directions that holds the rest of the stones in place. It is amazing. The Jews did not use cement, even in building the Wailing Wall. There is not per se cement. There's a filament, but the main thing that held the stones of the temple up and what holds the modern Wailing Wall up is weight pressure. The way they juxtapose and position the stones in tension to each other, pressing against each other. That's what makes it structurally rigid. This depended in an arch on a cornerstone. It held the rest of it in place. Strong as it is, if you take away the cornerstone, the arch collapses. And when the arch collapses, the foundation is destroyed, and everything built on top of it just implodes. It all depends on the cornerstone. Everything depends on Jesus. You take him out of it, and the rest will simply implode. One of the reasons, in fact, probably the main reason, we have seen the death of megachurches, Airport Vineyard and Pensacola, Florida, and Bill Hybels Circus in Willow Creek, and the Crystal Cathedral Schuler's Freak Show in the suburbs of Los Angeles, and these very now Hillsong's going. The reason you see these megachurches collapsing is the cornerstone is gone. They're no longer built on Jesus. They're built on entertainment. They're built on money. They're built on the egos of men. But they're not built on Jesus, and they're not built on his word. The pillars are gone. The apostles' teachings are not there. Once you take those things away, it's going to collapse. It's inevitable that it's going to collapse. It just can't stand. The only question is, when will it collapse? We are the temple. The church is God's house, the oikos.